I just wanted to talk about a book I read that I enjoyed very much. It's called The Education of Millionaires, and it's by Michael Ellsberg. As I went through it, I marked out some interesting quotes. This book is basically about how education and the finances surrounding education have become sort of like the new housing bubble. There are countless people, youth, that are fed the idea that if you want to succeed and be rich, you should get a job. And in order to get a good job, you have to go to college. And college is becoming increasingly expensive. So students are having to finance this through student loans. And then when they go to graduate, they come to find that they're unable to pay those loans back and are so badly entrenched in debt that they never get what was originally promised was a good job. Now, so here Michael Ellsberg refers to his shocking realization. He says, "At the age of 32, I came to a shocking realization. Not one penny of how I earned my income was even slightly related to anything I ever studied or learned in college. I was bringing in a very solid income as a direct response copywriter on a freelance schedule that many of my friends with paychecks and bosses envied. One could say I learned writing in college, but it is more accurate to say that I had to unlearn the turgid academic style of writing favored in college in order to write anything that moved product or made money for me or anyone else." So he had to relearn how to write, and I myself have had to learn to write differently than I wrote in college because, for instance, you're not supposed to say I or me in most college writing, but if you think about it, that's perfectly acceptable to use I or me in writing. In fact, it makes it more human and relatable anyhow. So he was making solid money. He was writing his book. He's earning money because he had to be good at marketing and selling. There are boatloads of good freelancers who are broke simply because they don't know how to market and sell their services. Okay, so he just wants to cut through all the bullshit surrounding branding. He says, "I'm about to cut through all the bullshit and give you a one-sentence definition of the word. Your brand is what people think about when they hear your name. Voila, I've just saved you tens of thousands of dollars in hiring brand consultants and years wading through books of trendy, semi-mystical corporate speak about brand leverage." He talks about Seth Godin here. Seth Godin's one of my favorite writers. I like his blog. I like his style. I read Tribes. That was a good book. I have Purple Cow. I'm going to read that one next. On this theme, Seth Godin told me, if you decided to go out and instead of finishing school, decided to learn things on your own that you thought were important, then that's your story. Everyone needs a story to get a job. On the back of your first book, it says you went to Brown. That's your story. Your story could be that you have the most popular blog on airline safety. And if you really have the most popular blog in the world on airline safety, and you're looking for a job doing PR on airline safety, that's a really good story. That's better than the story that you went to Brown. So really, what's more important is your story, not your background, not your specific credentials, but what's your story? What is it that you have to tell that relates to what it is you want to accomplish? Particularly when you're going to get a job, what's your story? Beyond the grim scene of recently minted JDs, MBAs, MAs, and PhDs, the picture was no brighter for fresh college graduates. We now live in an age when it is likely that the person pouring you your coffee at the cafe in the morning has spent 4 years studying literature, or even business and marketing, in a degree-granting institution. That person is likely to be carrying tens of thousands of dollars in student debt and more in credit card debt accrued in college for the privilege of having studied to pour your coffee with such literary and business acumen. And it's true, there are countless students, graduates who are working in restaurants, hotels, any odd jobs just to get by and pay their student loans, particularly after 2007, 2008 during the market crash when there were massive layoffs. And the last thing that the large companies were doing was hiring entry-level graduates. In fact, I can remember from my own experience graduating in 2007 and going to career fairs afterwards. I remember asking one woman in a technology company if they were hiring at a career fair, and she said no, they were not hiring. And I wondered, well, what are you doing at a career fair? And they were essentially just marketing. They're using the career fair to market, just to disseminate marketing materials, not even to hire. And I thought that was particularly interesting. I call it the I'm above learning how to sell mentality. And it's pretty much the bread and butter of our nation's higher education system. What they sell you is the idea that if you get enough of their credentials, enough letters after your name, then financial security, a great career, and real-world success will just fall in your lap without your having to do anything. So sure, yeah. The idea is after college you will just miraculously get a job, and that's not the case. You have to apply the same real-world hustle that you would had you not even had an education to begin with. So I think there is a certain lulling that occurs throughout students' education, that after all this hard work studying and taking tests and writing papers, that all this work is going to translate into a job at the end. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, it will probably just deter you from doing the things as necessary to effectively search for a job. It gives your need for hustle. It sort of diminishes your hustle in exchange for what you feel you deserve, like your entitlement. You're just being fed this entitlement that you're going to get a job when you're done, and it takes away from your drive to hustle for that job, I believe, depending on the person, of course. I confess it certainly did for me. No single skill you could possibly learn correlates more directly with your real-world success than learning sales. And yet, surprise, surprise, it's nowhere to be found on the curriculum of formal education, from elementary school through graduate school. No wonder there are so many broke and unemployed people with undergraduate and graduate degrees. Yeah, no sales, because that's basically what you're doing, is you're selling yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, then there are too many applicants for the company to choose from, and they're not going to choose you. If you're not going to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to market yourself, and those skills are 10 times as important as any curriculum that you learn throughout your education. Save for engineering or accounting. These are secondary to learning how to market and sell yourself. And this is from Henry Ford's biography about education. From Henry Ford's autobiography. Henry Ford wrote an autobiography, and Ellsberg quotes it here about education. Ford writes in his autobiography, "An educated man is not one who is trained to carry a few dates in history. He is one who can accomplish things. A man's real education begins after he has left school. True education is gained through the discipline of life. A man may be very learned and useless. Merely gathering knowledge may be the most useless work a man can do. What can you do to help to heal the world? That is the educational test. If a man could hold up his own end, he counts for one. If he could help 10 or 100 or 1,000 other men hold up their ends, he counts for more." So, yeah, it's really action that determines your value, not how much you know. Knowledge without action is inertia. It's not really worth anything. So it's like a two-edged sword. Knowledge and action. You have to fill your head with useful knowledge and then use that knowledge towards purpose in order for you to be valuable and have power. The art of earning a living is the art of finding creative ways of bringing the spheres of money and meaning together and making them overlap significantly. Money and meaning. Education. Call it an art because it's not always apparent how to best achieve financial stability while at the same time making a difference in a way you care about. So money. Money and financial security are completely separate from living with a sense of purpose and creating a meaningful life. These spheres bear no relationship to each other. The parents are advocating basically a dull, boring life in which the daughter pursues a career she cares nothing about in exchange for financial security. The daughter is advocating a life of passion, purpose, and meaning with no thought or regard for how she's going to pay the bills. So often students in their 20s harbor idealistic views and aren't necessarily concerned with money. Meanwhile, their parents urge them to get an education so that they will have financial security regardless of what it is they're studying, whether it's something that they're passionate about. And oftentimes students and 20-somethings aren't necessarily passionate about what they're studying, and there's a disconnect there between how you're going to make your money and what your purpose in life is. And the two should be unified. You should have a purpose that aligns with how you make a living. And this is how people get rich, is because they, behind the way they make a living, that which fuels their life and their lifestyle and their well-being, has to have a drive behind it. And that drive has to be your purpose. It has to have meaning. And if you don't, you're just going to get mired in the dull, repetitive, comfortable setting that you work in, and you're going to reach your level of incompetence, which I believe is the Peter Principle, which I haven't read but I've heard about. You only rise to the position that you are incompetent at, and that's as high as you go. And that relates here because you're only going to succeed if you have purpose and meaning behind your work. Page 50 is about living, about making a living. It's about making a living. In his book, The Monk and the Riddle, Randy Commissar advises you to ask a simple question about your current mode of income. Would you be willing to do this for the rest of your life? The point is not that you will do it for the rest of your life, but would you be willing? If this was all there was, no brighter tomorrow, no magic promotion or raise or investment that vaults you into the shrouded next level. Just this, now. Would you be happy with the rest of your life? If the answer is no, if the thought of doing your current gig for the rest of your life makes you totally depressed, then you owe it to yourself, having only one life to live, to figure out what kind of pursuit you would be willing to live till the end. That's a tough decision to make. I gotta go change my laundry. So let's talk about marketing on page 106. In turn, if the product or service is designed to solve a specific unsolved problem or meet a specific unmet need, and if the message is targeted well, so that you happen to be someone with that unsolved problem or unmet need, you will be happy to hear about the product or service. Think about the last time some product came along that solved a pesky, annoying, painful problem that had been bothering you for years. Perhaps some health problem, or technology problem, or home repair problem, or even a psychological or existential problem. Think of how excited you were when you heard that there was finally an effective solution to that problem. That is how good marketing is supposed to feel. A good example here is I'm a member of the Dollar Shave Club. I heard about that through Bill Burr's podcast. He would start in on his advertising segment of his podcast, which I would usually always skip through. But in the time between me hearing that he was going to start talking about advertising and the time it took me to skip forward, I would hear about the Dollar Shave Club for a few seconds. And then I started to think it might be a good idea because a lot of the shaving products, or the razors I would use, sucked. And they were the good ones are really fucking expensive. I think it's like $40 for like half a dozen razors or something ridiculous like that. And they had them in the store, ShopRite or Walmart. They always have them like glassed off, and you got to ask the person. You got to go find an assistant to come help you get the razors out so you can go buy them because they're in this protective case. And now, instead of doing that, I pay $6 a month and they just get shipped to my house. And I don't have to bother with all that. I don't have to go to the store. They just show up in the mail. It's only $6. That's significantly cheaper than it costs to buy them retail. And apparently now Dollar Shave Club is a huge company. I think I heard somewhere that they were worth over $1 billion. I don't know about that. But the point is that was a good example of effective marketing. I heard about something that I could truly use, and I had a problem, and it was perfect. So this is exactly what he's talking about here. If you talk with them about what's most important to them, instead of talking about your pitch, which I guarantee is low in the list of what's important to them, they will listen, and they will trust what you have to say. The process Craig offered was simple. Make a list of your prospect's biggest fears, frustrations, desires, dreams, and nightmares around the issue your product or service helps them with. List 25 answers for each of these categories. No single skill you could possibly learn correlates more directly with your real-world success than learning sales. And yet, surprise, surprise, it's nowhere to be found on the curriculum of formal education, from elementary school through graduate school. No wonder there are so many broke and unemployed people with undergraduate and graduate degrees. I'm talking about Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad. Robert, who listened to his poor dad's advice and graduated college, but listened to his rich dad's advice on almost all other matters related to money, told me, "I learned nothing about sales in school. I love education, but education that makes me rich. In my first job after leaving the Marines, I went on to work for Xerox. I was formally trained by Xerox to sell. Every day, 5 or 6 hours a day, I'm being trained to sell. How to overcome the fear of rejection. The biggest lesson I had to learn was how to fail faster. That was the biggest one because every day I'd take 3 sales calls, take 3 rejections. So all my rich dad said to me was, you've got to increase your rejections. The faster you fail, the more you are going to learn. That's why I left Xerox at 5 o'clock. I would go up to the street to this nonprofit charity helping homeless kids and would dial for donations at night. I had a goal every night of getting rejected 30 times. The more I increased my failure rate, the more success I had at Xerox." So I've heard this many times. You have to fail at a higher rate. You have to try and not be afraid of rejection. This applies in dating as well. You have to get through those 9 rejections in order to get to the 1 yes. Same in sales. You may have to get through those 19 or 18, 19 rejections in order to get to those 1 or 2 strong leads. Maybe one of them will close. But you have to get through those first 18 in order to get to the 1 or 2 that are going to result in success. And so you might as well become familiar with and intimate with rejection and get comfortable in that zone where you are uncomfortable. And this is what gives you a slight edge over the competition. is how comfortable you are with being rejected. The myth is that if you get better at your craft, if you get better at what you do, you will be more likely to be successful. So, if you're a doctor and you become a better doctor than others, then you'll be a more successful doctor. If you're a mechanic, you become a better mechanic, you'll be a more successful mechanic. If you're a software engineer, you become a better software engineer, you'll be more successful software engineer. This is the myth. Why does the higher education machine want us to believe this myth? Well, what are they selling in all their graduate and professional programs? They're selling, be better at your craft, just take a master's program. So that's because, if you take any craft and you look at it, the most successful people, furthermore, if you take any craft and you look at the most successful people in that craft as a group, their skill level is all over the map. Some are fantastic, and some are laughably bad. In fact, for some of them, you can't understand how they got to where they are, given how bad they are. This isn't true only in acting, it's true in every field. That's because success is its own skill. There's the skill of the craft, then there's the skill of success. It's an independent education. My experience is it takes about the same amount of effort to learn the skill of success as it does to learn the skill of the craft itself. So it might take years to really learn what you need to learn to become a great engineer, attorney, musician, manager, whatever. Networking. Then there's giving connections. Once you've got a great network in place, that's a highly time-leveraged form of giving. Meaning, once you've built up a great network, it doesn't take much time, just a phone call or an email to connect two people within your network, or to connect someone you just met with someone you already know. These connections can be life-changing for people, and assuming the connections are always well thought out, and they provide value for both people in being introduced, it's pretty much an infinite, inexhaustible form of giving. Elliot Bisnow told me everybody loves to give advice. If you ask someone in a genuine way to sit down with you, talk to you, give you advice, most people are happy to do it. It's shocking how few people go and ask for advice. If you call someone and say, "Hey, I love what you're doing, I think it's incredible, I'd love your advice on something," most people will sit down and give you advice, and talk with you, and mentor you. But most people just never do that. The savviest kids today already know how to build networks that work for them. Robert believes that time spent building your presence and networking of connections online, your personal brand, is one of the most important things you can do, because it will open up doors for you that simply wouldn't open otherwise. On sales. What I learned from my grandfather was the key to making money was to cause something to get sold. Whether you sell it yourself or employ someone else to sell it, and you get some of the money. He would always say the only way to make money is to buy something at one cost and sell it at a higher cost. If you do that, and you hustle, you make as much money as you want. Success, page 27. Success. The bigger the impact you want to make on the world, or in your chosen field, the bolder your purpose is, the greater the risks you're going to have to take, which means the greater the chance that you'll end up making no impact at all, other than the impact of your ass hitting the floor and failing at your purpose. And in spite of that, you have to go forward and try anyways. So